How's it going, everyone? Hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to another week of astrology. This is going to be for June 23 through June 29 of 2026. So this week we have some pretty big aspects playing out in the sky, some planetary changes. We are building up to one of the main events of the week, which is the full moon in Capricorn. That won't be exact until next Monday on June 29. But that is significant. I'll talk about the meaning of that in this video. And the Capricorn full moon is rolling the sign of Cancer, where we have 3 planets. One of them is changing signs. This will be the last week for Jupiter in the sign of Cancer for another 12 years. So Jupiter will ingress the sign of Leo for the next year, starting at the end of this report on Monday, June 29, after the full moon. So those are 2 major events, that full moon and Jupiter changing signs. We also have the sun in the sign of Cancer this week, making a trine aspect to the north node of destiny and a sextile to the south node. So that's a fateful connection starting the week off here. We also have the sun in Cancer making a square to Neptune in Aries. That'll be exact on Thursday, June 25. I'll talk about the meaning of that. The same day we have Venus making a trine aspect from Leo to Saturn in Aries. So those are both on Thursday. And then Friday, the sun is making an inconjunction to Pluto in Aquarius. The nodes will also be activated by the moon on that day, and there's just a lot of different lunar aspects on Friday. And then on Saturday, June 27, Mars makes a sextile to Jupiter. So both Mars and Jupiter are reaching the last degrees of these signs. So Mars will be at a critical degree and Jupiter will be at a critical degree before the energetics of these transits change. So I'll talk about the meaning of Mars trine Jupiter, and then we see that Mars does change signs officially on Sunday, June 28. Mars will ingress Gemini with this Uranus transit, and that's where things are going to speed up and get pretty wild and interesting with this new dynamic, and I'll be speaking about that and what it might mean. Then we do get to Monday on June 29, and there's a lot happening here, including the main event, which is the Capricorn full moon, and at the same time as this full moon, Mercury stations retrograde in the sign of Cancer. So things are coming to be illuminated by this full moon that will then ask us to process, review, and reflect on things that we'll become more aware of. And it's a bigger process that will last all through July before we're 100% clear and finalized with what this Cancer Mercury retrograde is talking about. So I'll get into that in this report. And then also on Monday, Mars in Gemini reaches the T-square with the nodes of fate, kind of reactivating the Uranus T-square, where the world has been at this fateful crossroads that's been ongoing for the last few weeks. But it'll be more personal and significant and fateful by next Monday into Tuesday. And the last aspect for this report week is Jupiter changing signs and ingressing Leo. So that'll be a pretty big change of energetics and what we'll be experiencing from that I will do my best to explain from my perspective. So these are all the major aspects. As always, check the description for the exact timing of everything with timestamps to follow along throughout the week. All right, so with that, let's get started here for Tuesday on June 23. Now this week, the moon is waxing through the rest of Libra, all through Scorpio, all through Sagittarius, and becoming full in Capricorn. So the moon is kind of in transit through this side of the zodiac that doesn't have any planets in it right now. But that's going to bring balance to everything else going on here. And just looking at the chart, we see that there's planets scattered all throughout the zodiac, and then the moon will be covering these few signs that don't have any transits. So basically, there's a lot of different energetics. People are being pulled in different directions. There's different influences in many different ways. But we still have the main focus down here in the sign of Cancer for Cancer season. It's generally, again, it puts more focus on people's needs for safety and security and comfort and home and family and the homeland in general. And it's being ruled by this moon here that just came out of the first quarter square. So I talked about that in last week's report, how the first quarter would likely show some obstacles, some challenges on what the Gemini new moon was talking about and how we're moving things forward. But the moon is technically still in Libra for Tuesday. The last aspect of Tuesday, the moon will be changing signs from Libra to Scorpio. But most of the day, the moon is in the sign of Libra, being ruled by Venus in the sign of Leo. And these two signs go well together, Libra and Leo. So the moon in Libra showing, again, a phase where people are trying to create more balance, more harmony. There's a need for more compromise, to be making deals and just thinking about other people and trying to look at things in a more objective way. So trying to balance things out. It can also deal with more about relationships and other people. And then this connection down to Venus and Leo. These are two very stylish signs. They like things to be nice and beautiful. They can be more social and outward and creative in different ways. So the moon is also, coming off that opposition with Saturn that's been picking up on also the more serious side of life and pressures and responsibilities and where we stand with commitments in certain relationships with other people. And the first aspect of the day for Tuesday is the sun making this trine and sextile to the nodes of fate. So it is a fateful day that just shows that the sun is actually highlighting something about the future here for Tuesday. Now that future is still in Pisces behind the scenes, so it's energetic, plus the sun in Cancer. It's more intuitive, it's more feelings based. So there's more private things under the surface, behind the scenes, emotions, feelings, intuition that could be connecting people to their future in some significant way. And then, so there's that pull into behind the scenes energetically of Pisces, but there's also this connection that the sun is making to the South Node in Virgo. So connecting fateful things around work and service and health and organization and the details of certain things that can also have a fateful long-term connection based on whatever's playing out here on Tuesday. Now the moon will make a square to this Mercury as Mercury is beginning to slow down now, where it's going to be going retrograde by the end of this week. So it's going to be very slow, only covering a few degrees here for the rest of this week. It's still next to Jupiter, but it's still in a place that's feelings-based and intuitive. And again, a lot of this is going to be about processing what came up earlier with the Venus-Jupiter conjunction at roughly 26, 27 degrees of Cancer. Now, I talked about how, that wasn't going to be just like the best thing in the world for every single person, even though that was a trendy topic for a while. And we also saw back on that report when I talked about that conjunction, how it was being ruled by the moon conjunct Saturn. So if you didn't see anything in a positive way, if you had a personal planet here in around 26 Cancer with that Jupiter-Venus, there might have been a restriction, a limitation, and a delay to what that's talking about. And that's why I said it could potentially be talking about something that's positive for you for the next year that will come in at some point. Again, a delay because of Saturn. And now Mercury's reaching that same spot of the zodiac and will be processing, reflecting, reviewing certain things that have been coming up here in June. But it's also a lot astrologically based on people's needs and feelings of things. And again, Cancer is a more traditional sign that doesn't want to take a risk. It wants to play it safe and think about ultimately the safety and security of self and family. And so there's a lot about that will have to go through a process all of July, but it's also wherever you have the sign of Cancer in your birth chart. It's a certain area of your life that's going through a reevaluation, a reflection, and officially that will start by next week, but it's still covering territory that's a part of this Mercury retrograde even this week, and what you're thinking about, what comes up, throughout the week here. Pay attention because it's connected to something bigger that will be ongoing here. And it's still, really amplifying a lot because it's right next to Jupiter as well. But the moon is running into a square with that, so there's a little bit of a tension in this process as the day goes on for Tuesday. It's going to be in, it looks like the afternoon hours that square comes in perfectly, moon square Mercury. So the moon here in Libra is in a more intellectual, objective placement, looking at both sides of a situation. And yet Mercury in Cancer is usually, again, more feelings-based and isn't objective. It's usually more subjective. So we have a conflict, between how we're thinking and feeling about things here. And generally, this is just the background. It's not every single person. And this will only last for a few hours in the afternoon of Tuesday. But there is a tension in this process with people's thoughts and feelings and communications. It can also affect travel and just general transportation issues and local environment issues because Mercury is in charge of Gemini, where Uranus is, stirring up all kinds of crazy things out in the streets and the world and through media, communications, and information. So we're picking up on something that could feel a little bit uncomfortable. It could also, stimulate the need for mercurial activity in different ways. Writing, speaking, communicating, running short trips, errands, being more social in some way, but there's still a background tension that comes along with it, most likely. So in my opinion, it's not the best time on Tuesday afternoon to be publishing something or broadcasting, doing mercurial things, because the moon, the circumstances of the world is kind of at odds with whatever is kind of being communicated on Tuesday. So if you have to do something, if you have to have an appointment or deal with something, then that could be a part of the tension. Then you have no choice. You have to do what you have to do. But if you do have a choice, I would kind of maybe avoid going out in town and doing errands when this is a square because it can be more annoying. There can be obstacles. There can be, again, transportation, traveling issues in some cases. So just kind of wait it out if you can. But if you can't, that's a part of the problem is you might have to do something that you don't feel like doing. Or there can just be, something a little more agitating in the mind or thoughts about things. And then that ultimately, it's showing that people are trying to find a better balance with how they're looking at things and thinking about things. Can you be objective, or will this subjective energy take over? So that's one aspect there. And then the moon is also in conjunct to Mars down here at the end of Taurus. So whatever comes up with this might also require some adjustment to how we're taking action or what we're motivated to do, our instincts, and the physical activity of life that's happening in this moment. Again, it could be a little bit irritating and requiring some sort of an adjustment to what's going on here in the afternoon hours. And then another square, the moon makes a square to Jupiter. So things are a little bit over the top with how people are feeling and thinking about things, because not only is it moon Mercury, but Jupiter's amplifying it all and making it all bigger than it otherwise would be. So, it also shows just generally things are a little bit over the top on Tuesday afternoon with what's happening. People's emotional responses could be bigger than normal. It might be challenging to keep things in perspective and keep things balanced and fair, and find that harmony that the Libra moon would be looking for. So the moon being ruled by Venus is being ruled by the sun in Cancer. The sun in Cancer is being ruled by the moon. So it has this loop. So it still has this connection to Venus and Leo as well. The more social side, creative side of life, people's personal desires and needs with things could be, again, stimulated and over the top. So this is where I tell people, be careful of your emotional responses. Just make sure you're not getting sucked into something that's little too much or exaggerated, with how people are responding to something, for good or bad. It can also be good things too that people are making a big deal about, but it can also be negative things that don't need to be, so dramatic in some way. And then it could just be, again, people's own desires for something could be very strong, a need for something, seeking something more that's not quite in balance. So the goal here is to try to bring harmony to all this and find better balance with the tension or the instincts or the desires and generally how people are feeling and thinking about things. So that'll be the main aspects for most of the day is that moon in tension. And then there's going to be a change here, a change of signs. The moon will ingress Scorpio later on for Tuesday night. So again, this will continue most of the day here because the moon's not going to change signs until literally right before midnight into Scorpio. So it's basically Libra all day long. But the moon does reach this last critical degree in the super late hours of Tuesday night. It'll be Wednesday morning for some people that the moon changes signs, and it does ingress Scorpio. So this is a new phase now. For the next 2.5 days, the moon is waxing forward. So you're seeing more and more light on the moon in the sky. In fact, there's over half full now. The first quarter was where the moon was half full. And so now it's building more and more. So the moon coming in here with half its light into Scorpio, a placement that's usually very hidden and private and talking about what's below the surface. The moon is bringing more illumination, more attention to these more private areas of the zodiac. But at the same time, I tell you this every month, the moon doesn't like to be here. It's debilitated in Scorpio. So it creates a little more of a challenging moon phase. Not only that, but the moon in Scorpio in this particular phase is ruled by Mars in Taurus, and Mars is also debilitated. So, we have two positions here now that take over because now Mars is in charge of the circumstances for the next 2.5 days. So it's not in its best position here. So there's a little more of a challenge, but there's also aspects that can ease the challenge because it gets help from the Cancerian side of the chart, because now the moon is in harmony with the sun. However, every time we go through a Scorpio moon for years into the future, it has to square Pluto in Aquarius. So generally it just creates a deeper, more intense emotional phase for the world. And it also brings up more energy for people's needs to be controlled, controlling their feelings, not wanting to be as exposed as much. And so that's why people will generally try to control, what other people see about them, or, they don't want everything out there in the open as much. It does generally deal with a more private phase, a deeper phase. And it brings up the deeper water of emotions and feelings again. That's in harmony with where the sun is focused in the sign of Cancer. So it's just not as emotional as the sign of Cancer because it's more private about it generally. But again, now that it's being ruled by Mars in the sign of Taurus, it brings up a lot about money and resources. Both Taurus and Scorpio have this connection here by Wednesday. So there's more emphasis on the 5 senses of pleasure, the physicality of life as well, and then the deeper side, people's emotional need for a deeper connection with others, deeper intimacy. It also brings up issues of attachments, and where people are feeling attached to certain things. And it also brings up this new transit that we're experiencing for the first time in decades, whereas now the moon is opposing Chiron. And that's literally the first aspect of the day for Wednesday, June 24. So now we have this Chiron. Now, again, it's only going to stay here at 0 degrees, until it comes back to Aries and then fully comes back here for 2027. But we're getting a glimpse of what this is talking about So the moon opposite Chiron brings up emotional sensitivities about worth and value and money and resources and the material physical world that we live in and have, and where we stand with physical things about life and also about beauty and the nicer side of life versus the deeper, uglier side of life. So some wounds and sensitivities and vulnerabilities in new ways could start to show for some people. And I would say, especially if you have the first few degrees, especially 0 degrees even, of the fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. There's a new transit that you're going to have to go through, if you have planets in the beginning of the fixed signs. But right now it's only 0 degrees where it's perfect. So again, I think it brings up, a lot about the Taurus-Scorpio axis, which has a lot to say about your personal values versus the values of the other people in your life, partners, your level of intimacy in your life with other people, and just where you stand with money and resources in different ways. But it's still being ruled by this Mars, which is also starting to reach the end of Taurus, starting to enter critical territory, and will lead to a change as well here. So a moon in Scorpio, just expect deeper emotions and feelings and desires and power control issues under the surface are happening. Things get a little more intense. It's also a phase that generally shows more transformation starts to happen in daily circumstances with others, or whatever Scorpio is in your birth chart is where there's emotional energy moving through there, which again is deeper and private in some way. And after the moon is opposing Chiron, it does align with the nodes of fate, in fact making a grand trine with the nodes of fate and the sun. But again, this is water. It's internal, it's emotions, it's feelings based and private, where there's something connecting us to our future, are pulling us into our Piscean area of life behind the scenes. Energetically, it was something is influencing our future this week based on what's playing out. So another fateful connection. We see it in Tuesday and into Wednesday. And then, again, the moon is trine the sun. So this is where we've come off that first quarter square between the moon and the sun, where they're challenging, the inner and the outer. And now the inner and the outer are more in flow, more in harmony. Again, it's water. It's all feelings and intuitive. And things are flowing on a more private, personal level. Generally, of course. And then the moon makes an inconjunction to Uranus and Neptune, the two outer planets that are beginning to align with each other, Uranus and Neptune. So the moon has to connect here. And, we could even say it's not perfect, but it's a finger of God aspect pointing towards 3 to 4 degrees of Scorpio. And this is going to be first thing in the morning on Wednesday for pretty much everybody. So adjusting to the outer world and what's going on in the outer world. Neptune on the world point of a new vision, new dreams, the old world dissolving away more and more each day, each week, each month. Uranus and Gemini stirring up radical revolutionary ideas and things out in the streets and news and media and ways of thinking about things. Again, affecting all of the mutable signs and what the mutable signs represent. Education and beliefs and faith and understanding and transportation and local area events and health and work and service and what we're influenced by energetically, privately from the collective and what's in our environment. There's so many different things that this Uranus is connecting to that's changing the world and the perspective and perceptions of the world. that we're having to adjust to, things that could be disruptive a little bit here on Wednesday morning. So the outer world versus this inner, deeper phase that people have come into on Wednesday. And then the last aspect for Wednesday is the moon making this square to Pluto that we deal with now every month. So the square between Scorpio and Aquarius, the emotions versus the intellect again, and attachments versus detachment. So Scorpio moon deals with deep emotional attachments. And so this shows a phase of another round of forced change, forced transformation to some emotional attachments that people have. And again, this is more on a worldly general level that's happening. It could be more personalized for you if you do have roughly 5 degrees of one of the fixed signs, because you're already under the Pluto transit back and forth. That's stirring things up for you to have to deal with on a deeper level. But it's about letting go. It can also show, though, there's tension happening with the community, organizations, groups of people, general community, friends. The mood is kind of at odds with that, because this Aquarius side is the more social side of life with group and friends and community that needs a little more space and detachment and not as personal. But the moon is in a very personalized position here. So it's bringing more emotions to the community, intensified emotions and feelings of things that are, amping people up. But it can also show events happening literally in the world with certain community situations that are overly intense and edgy, and there's these undercurrents of power and control dynamics playing out, so people generally are more manipulative and trying to force their will and their agenda, maybe passively, not as directly in some way here. And then there could also be other intensified situations about money, the market, and what's happening on Wednesday, with financial situations that could also be even manipulated or going through some sort of a change, intensified. So just know that, the mood, the vibes could be a little bit off with the community here for Wednesday, late morning or afternoon. And again, though, if you are dealing with a social situation, you can find the exact time that this square is taking place by the aspect list I give you, and then recalculate it for your local time. And then you'll know exactly when this is playing out, and you can be more aware of the undercurrents, and just kind of see beyond what the average person is seeing by knowing the astrology and not getting sucked into things impulsively. But that, again, it shows a shadow as well and some intensified emotions with people. And then that's the last aspect for Wednesday until we get to Thursday. On June 25, the moon is halfway through Scorpio. And the first aspect is the moon squaring Venus. So the moon is still being ruled by Mars in Taurus. It still has this physical side about it as well, and money and resources and needs. And yet the moon, the circumstances are still in this deeper placement for relationships that want deeper levels of intimacy. And yet it's running into this square with Venus, which rules relationships. So there's a clash here. This is generally also a pretty dramatic square between Scorpio and Leo. People's passions and drama can, get triggered by things. Sometimes people can feel like, they're not as valued or appreciated. And so some hurt feelings are likely to come out in some situations in relationships. So be mindful of that on Thursday. This is actually happening really early on the West Coast. Looks like it's the 3:00 hour a.m. So it's going to be, 6:30 in the morning on the East Coast. It'll be later in the morning, afternoon in Europe. So if you're on the West Coast, it might be a little bit too early. By the time you wake up, this could be done with. But for other people, if you're, when this is exact, if you're dealing with relationship, There could just be tension in that. There could also be tension in how satisfied people are feeling with this moment. It's clashing with the pleasure planet, the desires, the attraction, the needs. They're clashing with, it's like what people are attracted to is at odds with what people need to feel good and comfortable. And so it can also show just something is a little bit off with the pleasure, with being satisfied, content with things. There could be a strong emotional need for pleasure, for beauty, for the good stuff of life, and it just might not be available in this moment, And then Venus in Leo is much more expressive and creative and bold and putting oneself out there, even with love and style and just being seen, being visible and letting the world see you and your style and taste of things. And yet the moon in Scorpio, again, is not always wanting to be exposed, not always wanting people to see everything going on. They have things that they're controlling on a deeper level. So just bringing up these kind of clashes for people generally. And you can kind of observe too, knowing this aspect, you can just see how it's playing out by looking at how other people are reacting or what they're expressing in the moment. And you can recognize some of these tensions. The moon is also making an in conjunction at the same time to Saturn, picking up on something more serious, more heavy, more restrictive, or a limitation that we might feel within that moment. And yet Venus is also almost perfectly trine Saturn, which it will be on this day as the day goes on. So Venus and Saturn are working well together in harmony in the outer life, but it's clashing with the mood or the feelings and circumstances happening at the same time here on Thursday morning on a deeper level that's more private and people aren't expressing that as much. But the Venus trine Saturn is good for making good decisions about money, being a little more mature within relationships, taking relationships more seriously. There's also a better opportunity to make long-term plans about relationships, money, resources, commitments with certain things. So there's that in the background that's more in harmony with these two planets. But the moon is just kind of at odds with both of them as they're making this agreement in some way on Thursday. This could be a deal. This could be a commitment, a contract in some cases. Maybe it has something to say about what's going on in the world between the U.S. and Iran deal and all that. But it can also be on personal levels. Venus rules Libra, so it can be in different scenarios for different people. Any kind of a deal or a contract that deals with money or partnership or relationships, or anything like that, then I think that there could be something showing in a positive way, some agreement or something happening with an authority, with, again, relationships or money deal. So if you do have anything like that happening, then I think you can trust, to make a deal, to sign a contract, even if the mood or there's, even if it's not perfect in some way because of where the moon is, that's kind of clashing with it a little bit. But the Venus Saturn is much stronger because the moon is a temporary transit here. It's the quickest energy that's always changing. Whereas these, Venus will only trine Saturn once a year from this position to Aries, while Saturn is in Aries for 2.5 years. So this year, next year. So this is much more rare. But I do think it's good, Venus trine Saturn, to be making a good decision about something. Saturn being ruled by Mars. Mars is being ruled by the Venus. Venus is being ruled by the Sun, and the Sun is being ruled by the Moon. So it could definitely talk about something with money, a contract, a deal, money, something like that. So for some people, it could play out that way in a positive scenario, even though the rest of the day is kind of wrapped around this tension. And the last aspect here on Thursday is the sun in Cancer making that square to Neptune. So let's look at when that's perfect, where the moon is. So this will be later on Thursday as the day goes on. So this is when it's perfect. The sun square Neptune, afternoon, evening, depending on where you live. And the moon will be at almost 20 degrees coming into a trine with Mercury and Jupiter because the moon is rolling the sun. But it's still a little bit of a problem with the focus on Thursday as the day goes on. So we have this positive connection happening with some sort of an agreement. But this Venus is being rolled by the sun in a square with Neptune at the same time. And so that would suggest that not everything about an agreement is 100% clear. There's still going to likely be some uncertainty with this on Thursday, whatever's showing up in the world, which again, it most likely will have some big world events, I would imagine. And it can be on these personal levels between what I talked about, any kind of contract, deal, negotiation, relationship, whatever it is that comes up. You have to accept that not everything is 100% clear and you don't have all the details perhaps. And then you also have to make sure that everything is on the up and up. Make sure there's no scandalous activity or conspiracy or anything shady, basically. Just avoid getting wrapped up in anything that is not right, which I think most of you would know and understand, like what's right and wrong, and I think most of us do. So as long as you don't get sucked into something that is wrong, then I think it's fine. But it still shows a lot more sensitivity. It shows that the focus is not quite narrowed in this. Things are more broad. These are right on the angles of the cardinal signs, the most powerful about starting things and initiating things. So the sun is kind of putting a bad light on dreams, on things that are inspiring, on fantasies, on illusions, and there could be some of these things in the world happening, illusionary things that are in the spotlight are being focused on. It's a clash between self and home and family and property in the homeland, and then the sun, authority figures. In some way here. So just look at it as Neptunian in nature on Thursday, which is dreamy, creative, sensitive. Things are extra sensitive. Things aren't as in focus. Things are more blurry, uncertain, some confusion, some doubts. Maybe this will show something about a major storm as well that could get triggered around later this week, maybe even here on Thursday. Some, really powerful, dramatic storm or something that gets some sort of headlines. The moon is, the sun is being ruled by the moon in Scorpio, which deals with the deeper, darker side of life while this is happening. So these can be separate issues even than the Venus trine Saturn, which could be some sort of a deal or something better that's more cooperative with something, a contract or something more serious. And then there could be a separate issue in different ways with this sun Neptune later on as the day goes on. Also, generally, I would say be more aware of authority in your life, which could be bosses or people in charge. They may not be they may not be seeing things clearly, or there could be something illusionary that's happening with some sort of person of power. Now, if you have 4 degrees of one of the cardinal signs in your personal birth chart, then you're under this once-in-a-lifetime Neptune already. So again, the first few degrees up to 4 to 5 of Cancer is being squared by Neptune this year for the first time. And this sun will kind of reinforce that and highlight that of what this Neptune transit is talking about for you. But also the first few degrees of Capricorn, and of course Aries is getting the conjunction, and then the first few degrees of Libra. They're all wrapped up in this Neptune transit, which is trying to basically change reality, change visions, change what inspires people, to be in this more outward phase of life that's trying to come in strong, to push people into new territory of life and what needs to be started here. But Neptune can still be fuzzy, uncertain, confusion, a lot of confusion, having to go with the flow with some things, not seeing everything exactly clear in this moment. So I'll leave it at that. Could be good for art, creativity, the more dreamy, spiritual, or creative activities could be in better alignment with this. All right. Now moving this forward, and we get to Friday on June 26th. The moon is at the last degrees of Scorpio for the first part of the day. This is the day that has a lot of different aspects. First aspect, though, is the moon trine this Mercury and Jupiter. So things open up. Things are flowing more. Now the moon isn't square Mercury. It's in trine to Mercury. So now the heart and the mind are on more in alignment. But it's water, it's feelings, intuition, and the more private inner side of life is what's flowing in more harmony. But that won't last because the moon is going to be changing signs as the day goes on. But this would be a better time to express, to communicate, to do errands here, because Jupiter can also add things to be bigger in an easier way, more flowing, more opportunity. So first thing on Friday morning, the moon. This is also when the sun in Cancer is in conjunct to Pluto in Aquarius. So again, the sun is focused on the internal life, the homeland, the family, the property, and safety and security and comfort and kind of playing it safe. But it's having, our focus has to adjust to the intensity in the group with the friends or the community in the outer world, that's pulling our attention away from some of the inner focus to the outer. And then again, adjusting to power, control dynamics, intensity, and all that Pluto stuff. And then the moon is opposite Mars, kind of bringing this culmination to what's been in play the last 2.5 days about money and resources and the physical, material side of life versus the deeper emotional needs of people. So moon opposite Mars can also just rile people up a little more, be more impulsive, instinctive, active in some way, and, more intensified feelings of how people are expressing. But luckily, there's still that trine, down to the Jupiter Mercury, which helps the situation out to be, a little better there. And then the moon will change signs. The moon reaches this last critical degree of Scorpio as the day goes on, which is all first thing in the morning that all these aspects in Scorpio are happening. So by late morning on the West Coast, afternoon for other places, the moon changes signs and ingresses Sagittarius for the next 2.5 days. So now the mood, the feelings, the circumstances are coming out of the deep end of Scorpio and coming into the bigger, larger than life sign of Sagittarius, where everything is more amplified and expansive with feelings and needs. And usually it can be good too. It can be more fiery, more passionate. The moon coming into Sagittarius. But right as the moon comes into Sag now for this new phase, it's in conjunct to this Chiron. So we're still adjusting to something that's been coming up in a new way about Chiron and Taurus and the physical, material, earthly side of the chart and values and needs and things. But the moon is also T-squared the nodes of fate and building the opposition with Uranus. So there's actually a lot here right as the moon comes into Sagittarius Friday afternoon, Friday evening. And now the moon is being ruled by this Jupiter, which is at the last critical degree of Cancer. A sense of urgency for things to be changing here, but the mood can get big for good or bad. either way. People generally want more freedom, more independence here with the moon in Sagittarius. People want to take things a little lighter, not get so serious, not so as intense. There's also just a stronger emotional need for seeking things, seeking something larger, bigger in different ways. There can be more emphasis on foreign things, cultural things, traveling, education, learning, wisdom and knowledge, and again, connected to what's above and beyond just the normal everyday life. And something even exciting that might want to start to come in, because it's going to lead to this Jupiter changing signs once the moon is full and has culminated something here. One second. So now we have a lot more fire again, more fire, more passion, more instincts, more adventure. And a big mood change overall. So then, whatever's happening, it's fateful. We're at a fateful crossroads again in the world. And also with the moon opposite Uranus, it's kind of also culminating a lot of this new stuff that's been coming out with Uranus, where the world has been at a fateful crossroads. In fact, this might be the culmination to this aspect. I think with Mars coming in here, it's going to reactivate the world at this crossroads a little bit. But, the opposition is like a culmination point. And there's a lot that the world has been at this crossroads with, including the war and all these major things happening globally that's shaping the long-term future of the world. And now there's like this moment of a culmination to that. Everything's big and coming to light about, these world dynamics on this bigger level of life. But this is also in opposition in the two signs that deal with traveling and transportation. There could still be some wild card things, some disruptions here and there, just something unusual that's happening, in the everyday life on Friday with this dynamic. It can also talk about education, both higher education and lower education, something coming out, something at a turning point, with different educational themes. And then media, news, and just the mood gets a little more rebellious and wild and crazy perhaps for a little bit here on Friday evening, Friday night. But then the moon makes a trine and a sextile to the outer planets of Pluto and Neptune, forming a minor grand trine. So now the circumstances are generally connected to the community in a better way, better outward connections, better friendship connections, and just the general community and social side of life. And now the moon is connecting better to the dreams, the fantasies, the visions of what wants to be created, what people are seeking out for this next level of life. And then there's also a little bit of another finger of God aspect pointing right to the sun in Cancer. That shows something, again, could be fateful, happening on a world level with the world leader potentially there on Friday or around Friday, but maybe Friday. And that is the last aspect, the moon in conjunct to the sun. So now the moon, the inner nature of people, are at odds with where the focus is. And this is the last little mutual reception. This is the last time the moon and Jupiter will have a mutual reception from these placements for another 12 years. So there's still this Cancer side of the chart, that really, that's where the focus is. There's a lot of big energy that's still down here. It's just that the moon is totally at odds. The moon is up and above and beyond the home, the family, the inner world, and the inner nature of feelings and intuition. So they're just kind of on two different pages, what people need and feel versus what they're focused on. But the focus would likely still be, generally speaking, the safety and the security and the comfort of what we need that we're going to reflect and review on. And Mercury is now reaching 26 degrees, where the conjunction of Jupiter and Venus were taking place. So again, if you didn't see anything positive from that, there's seeds being planted for the next year that something could come about, that you're not quite seeing yet. There was just a delay because it was rolled by the moon conjunct Saturn that I told you guys about when it was happening. And there was people that didn't like to hear that bad news, because it's been so hyped up of the Jupiter Venus, how it's like the luckiest day of the year and everybody's going to receive some big thing. And unfortunately, it's just not. Astrology is way more complex, really, than. We try to make it as simple as we can here, generalizing it, but it's really complicated, and the details are in your own personal astrology and transits and progressions and other things that are your own personal astrology that I can't generalize here. Okay, so anyway, that's the last aspect for Friday. And then get to the weekend on Saturday, June 27. There's only three major aspects, and they're all easy. The moon is still in Sag with the mutual reception to Jupiter, so that's generally a better mood, better feelings, better opportunities, more expansive, seeking something more, being more adventurous. All those things I talked about the day before with the moon in Sag. But the moon makes a trine to Saturn for the first aspect, which will be in the afternoon hours of Saturday. So, we're in a better alignment with authority, generally with responsibilities and commitments, and looking at our own self too, and how we feel about the self and what self-responsibility that we have to take this next couple of years. And I would say it's a wide orb grand trine, because then the moon is also trine Venus, kind of reactivating the connection between Venus and Saturn. Again, this could be another moment of something in a more positive way with making a deal, a contract, making a commitment to something in a better way. Now there's a better opportunity to feel more satisfied with pleasure, with circumstances, with relationship here. Something flowing better and more passion as well, more excitement and on more of an outer level of life versus the moon in Scorpio that was clashing with it. And again, by the time this comes in, will be Saturday night. Now, Mars is at a critical degree this weekend, and Jupiter is at a critical degree. So this is just the a moon aspect. It only lasts for a few hours on Saturday night. It does show that there's a potential of something that can feel more positive, more happy, more self-expressive, more creative, more enjoyment of something. But there still could be something critical in the world, because this Mars in this critical degree is being ruled by this Venus in Leo, which is generally a more social placement for people. So there could still be some critical events and social situations this weekend, unfortunately, even though there could be moments of something nice at the same time and pleasurable and enjoyable. Because there's a sense of urgency for people in some way here. But even Mars is getting a boost, because Mars is making the sextile to Jupiter. So Mars is getting reinforced with strength and potential and opportunity of some kind here that feels like it's rushed, a sense of urgency for something to be changing. And that's what will happen. Mars will come to Gemini and Jupiter will come to Leo. They're going to change energy in a really powerful way by the end of this week. So there's a boost for action and passion and drive and determination here. And I would say there's a better opportunity to achieve something. Because again, Mars is getting help from Jupiter, and Jupiter has a mutual reception with the moon. So there is three easy aspects on Saturday into Saturday night that do feel positive in some way. I just can't, I can't say that there'll be no other issues in different ways at the same time. That's the problem, is nothing is just one thing. There's always a combination of different things happening here. But still, I like this, because there's a connection to it, to the circumstances that's in a trine with Venus. And Venus is ruling that Mars. So if you do have 29 degree of Cancer, you're getting this rare Jupiter transit right now that's more expansive. Yes, Jupiter and Cancer, I'm glad that it's leaving, actually, because too much emotions, too much feelings of people, too much, being subjective. I'm more of a fire and air person. So, the water and earth signs, I do have 2 planets in earth as well. But other than that, I'm mostly fire and air. And so this next era, it's just better for fire and air people, because the earth and water people have had a lot of big transits supporting their signs in this last long phase. And now it's the fire and air people's turn to get more support, more opportunity to feel better with the dynamics overall. But some people could have, a combination too. We're not all just one. So it's like you could have fire and air, and one in some areas of your life could be way more supportive with these new dynamics. But then you might have the water and earth still that's clashing with one side of your life. So that's why, again, astrology is complicated. You got to really know your own astrology to really figure it out. But this is one of, this day is literally the only day that has all easy aspects where there's cooperation between these different planets helping each other out, making things more possibly successful in whatever's happening for Saturday night. All right, and then we get to Sunday on June 28th. The moon is at the end of Sagittarius, and there's only a few things happening. So one big thing is this Mars changing signs for Sunday. So the first few hours of the morning, Mars is in Taurus, and then Mars changes into Gemini by the afternoon hours. So the first part of the day is different energetically compared to the second half of the day. Now we have the beginning of this next transit of Mars in Gemini. So now this is an improvement for Mars, actually, because Mars is no longer debilitated. Mars doesn't have any special dignity here in Gemini, but it's not debilitated anymore. So now Mars is no longer being ruled by Venus. Mars is being ruled by Mercury, which is literally stopped and preparing to station retrograde. So something really big has come in. Some sort of a change has happened through the weekend that leads to this energetic change. Now, Mars coming into Gemini is all about the mind. So way more mental stimulation and activity and variety of different things are going to start to speed up and accelerate, So this is going to just amp up all this Uranus and Gemini even more and more. And of course, they'll be conjunct by early July, which we'll probably see, a lot happening around the 4th of July with this. But people's minds, people's communication style starts to change. Now it still has this more subjective, intuitive, sensitive connection for now. That's what's interesting about it, because it comes back to the sign of Cancer. But even Mercury stopping here, makes all this even more amplified than normal. So people just can tend to say things a little more direct, like when you can't wordplay with people that have Mars in Gemini. They'll destroy you with words, and with Uranus here, people's drive, people's impulsiveness with how they communicate and express themselves are a little more wild and unpredictable, and more direct, and can say things that you're not supposed to say. This isn't, PR. This is kind of being bold with how words are being spoken, which can cut like a knife. And if people have this more emotional connection to it at the same time, people's feelings and emotions being triggered to be spoken in a more weird way, because you get this more kind of passive side of it, and then you got this more direct side of it. But it doesn't have to be all negative. There's a lot of positive about this. It's going to start to trigger a part of this new era for the world. So the world is now entering some sort of new territory that we haven't seen before. And that's going to be based on what plays out this week into the weekend on the world stage. And so there's something new here now that we're seeing, and we're going to see more and more of it each day that goes on here. But I would say overall, I would just, watch your impulsiveness with Mars Uranus. Be careful what you say, be careful what you do, what you jump into without thinking about it. Check yourself, And if you have the first few degrees of the mutable signs, if you have any personal planets there, then you're already getting the Uranus transit that's activated that for you. But Mars will now bring it another round of it in some way. Trigger something for some sort of new activity or new dynamics that start to come in. So everything we've talked about with this Uranus in Gemini, how it's been at the crossroads with the nodes of fate, and the world has been at this crossroads based on what's playing out with certain, media information. So this is also about data and information and facts that are going to start coming out more and more about things of the past. And because that Uranus has been connecting to the South Node in Virgo, there's a lot about the health dynamics of the world and what's been playing out for several years that we all know about, that's going to get triggered. That's all fateful information and media and news and all this kind of stuff. It's having a long-term effect on the future, so now it's going to get even more radical with new facts and information being spoken. And just other people's emotional responses can just be more sharp and cutting with their words. And there's also a little more of a rebelliousness that could come in here, especially with the mind and how people are thinking, wanting more freedom, wanting to be liberated with old thoughts or restrictions and limitations of certain ways of how you've thought about certain things about the world or whatever Gemini is for you in your birth chart. Whatever area that is, there's going to be more activity there, more personalized activity coming in there. Wherever you have the first few degrees of Gemini, which again is connected to this bigger theme of the world changing. So technology, social situations, transportation and traveling is going to start moving forward in some new way and get triggered in some new way. This still looks like a little bit of a red alert for traveling, unfortunately, because of Mercury stopped. Remember, the Mercury retrograde isn't such a big deal. The worst time about the Mercury retrograde phase is when it stopped, either stationing retrograde or stationing direct. So when Mercury's not moving from the Earth's perspective, it's more amplified and intensified and can have more issues. But this one is very unique because it's ruling this conjunction of Mars and Uranus in Gemini. So there's always a chance that there could be more disruptions here coming in late this weekend into next week around travel and transportation. And then this could also trigger something that the Mercury retrograde is going to need to process, reflect, review all of July before, we see something finished and moving forward based on what gets triggered. Mostly, I would say, by July. But the vibes kind of start now with this Mars ingress to Gemini. So words are weapons now. Words are weapons and can cut sharply and can really trigger some sensitivity in people. And social media is going to get super amped up here. News, generally. So prepare for the world to be moving forward. And we're about to have a full moon. That's the next big change. Now, the other two aspects, it's just the moon making inconjunctions to both Mercury and Jupiter. So really the biggest thing is this change of flavor for Mars. And then having to make a lot of adjustments to, again, what we're going to be processing and thinking about and believing in. And, this leads to a change that gets much more serious as we move forward and get to Monday on June 29. The first thing that happens for Monday is the moon ingressing Capricorn, and the full moon vibes are on first thing for Monday morning, even though the full moon won't be exact until 4:56 p.m. on the West Coast. So it'll be Monday night on the East Coast. super early in the morning if you're in Europe. But still, right as the moon comes into Capricorn, it's a new flavor. It's the full moon vibes. And the moon coming in here is much more serious now. From that Sagittarius to Capricorn, it changes how people feel about things and how they express. And really, it's all about this full moon. But the moon is automatically making a grand trine / kite with Chiron and the nodes of fate. So moon, now that the moon is in Capricorn for the next 2.5 days becoming full, it's being rolled by this Saturn. And we see Saturn has reached 14 degrees of Aries for the first time in decades. And this is the degree that Saturn will be going retrograde later on. Not soon here, but Saturn is now slowing down, and it's only going to get to halfway through 14 degrees. So Saturn's going to be stuck here at 14 degrees, for the next couple months. So this full moon is coming back to the planet that rules authority, karma, the more serious side of life, responsibilities and commitments, and kind of showing us where we stand with what we have to take responsibility on and what we have to be committed to, or look at those things at least. So when the moon comes in here, it's also about work and goals and ambitions and achievements. And again, a lot about people's careers and work versus the sun in the home, in the family life, the inner world of safety and security and comfort. So it's like this axis of Capricorn and Cancer is about the safety security axis of both your outer world, professional material world, and your inner world. So a lot about that is coming to light. This is generally more of a traditional phase. Capricorn, more of a traditional sign. Now it's a little different for the people born in the late 80s and 90s with Uranus and Neptune there. But they still have to respect tradition, but they have to add and innovate something new and creative to the systems and structures of the world now that they're coming into this older age of where they're going to be a part of the world in a bigger way as time goes on. But they still have to respect, what's come before them. And we all do where we have Capricorn. All right, so the moon, trine, Neptune, Chiron, so we're in a better flow with this new wound wherever we have Taurus. That's going to be a part of the future here. And then it's fateful, whatever happens here on Monday. Again, another round of the nodes of fate being activated. We are having to adjust to this new energy of Mars because the moon in Capricorn is totally different from this radical, placement of Mars, Uranus, and Gemini, which is more changeable as well. And it has more of a youthful, revolutionary vibe to it. That's more rebellious, and more about being sharp and communicative and witty and clever and, kind of still having a more of a play kind of tone to it versus this more serious mood and circumstances that's coming to light where people, generally need to be more serious, more committed, more punctual and responsible with things. So it's like an older energy versus a younger, youthful energy down here. Plus Mars is building up to T-squared the nodes of fate. So the world is definitely being triggered in a fateful way for Monday that's building up to this full moon. And we might have to make a lot of adjustments to new things on Monday. And then the moon makes a square to Neptune as the day goes forward. It's going to be really, still pretty early in the day that moon makes the square for a few hours. So now with the moon, though, it's almost full. So there's a lot of light that's illuminating things here and trying to help us see things in a different perspective and way. So there can still be some uncertainty, some confusion, some doubts, or, about where we stand with certain ambitions and goals and work and dreams and visions of things. But that's only for a few hours. And then Mercury officially stations retrograde here at 26 degrees of Cancer. So again, if you have 26 degrees of Cancer, you're perfectly aligned with this Mercury retrograde. And it shows that say you have your sun there. Well, this is going to require you to really reflect and review on you, your life, your purpose, but also whatever the sun rules in your chart, which is Leo. Wherever you have Leo, the sun is in charge of that if you have a Cancer sun at 26 degrees or any other personal planet at 26. That's why I can't get into the details of what it means for you perfectly, because it's complicated based on your own astrology. But I would still say that if you have 26 degrees, you're connected to a few different rare things that are connected to something bigger throughout the rest of the year. And for the next month, you're going to have to process, review, reflect, or finish up, or something isn't quite ready, to move forward. You need more clarity about something, better understanding about something, that the Mercury retrograde will then, kind of show that by August it's moving forward finally and something is complete on a temporary level here. But it's all of us too. We're going to have to start reflecting on where we stand with this axis of Capricorn and Cancer, because it's this full moon that's bringing something out into the open for us to see, to illuminate our understanding about something that then says, okay, well, we have some sort of new information or some new awareness, but we don't have it all. We need more time with something. Then that will lead us to the Mercury retrograde of continuing to reflect and review on things that have been coming up and kind of figuring it all out, until we have better understanding and move forward with it by August. So 26 degrees. So if you have 26 Libra, 26 Capricorn, 26 Aries, 26 Cancer, you're really wrapped up in what this Mercury retrograde is talking about. It's something personal for you that you're going to be affected by. And it's not just that degree, but that's the perfect degree. So you can also factor in, the first or a few degrees below that too. I wouldn't go to 27 or above. I would stick to, 24, 25, 26, maybe around there. If you have that, plus Mercury will be going back over those degrees. And then if you have earlier degrees too, this whole shadow phase that Mercury has been in. But when it stops, it's the most important. So 26 is where it's perfectly stopped. And again, everything about Mercury is going to be more amplified now because it's because of the stationary, and it's rolling this Mars-Uranus, which is T-squared the nodes of fate. So again, there's a possibility something could be coming out here. Now, this moon is also speaking about government. This is a culmination and a turning point for government situations that have been building up for the past 6 months. So this is definitely big world developments this week into next week. Now, it can also be on this personal level because we all had a Capricorn new moon 6 months ago. And that was the beginning of a new cycle for the next 6 months on what we're going to work towards and achieve and accomplish. And now this moon has come around and is becoming full in this sign. So roughly 6 months later, we have to look at, okay, what have we achieved this past year? Did we achieve what we wanted to, or is there changes to that? Are we going to now continue to work towards something that we've already been, looking at and wanting to achieve, or do we need to change our plans or something? Or is it done? Have we accomplished something? It's going to be different for each person depending on your situation, but this is a full moon that's illuminating all that for us to see where we stand with responsibilities, commitments, duties, obligations, work, career, goals, all these bigger, more mature, serious things of life. And then on the world stage, it's governments ready for a change of some type here in different ways. And it can be on all kinds of different government levels. It could be the local government in your area is going to start to come out with something new laws, a new system, work things. It all depends. It could be on state level. It could be on federal levels. It could be different governments around the world in different scenarios. Not every single government, obviously, but like major developments in career, work, and government situations, which also says there could be some new laws, that's coming out in a big way. New rules of something that you have to follow, that's being illuminated. And then again, it's showing you where you stand on your personal level of achievement, of the past 6 months? And have you worked towards something, or do you still need to continue to work towards something now? Do you need to let something go that you've been working towards? A full moon shows something is ready to change, wherever you have the sign of Capricorn. Now, let me align this full moon. I think it's about 8 degrees here. Yeah, 8 degrees. So if you have 8 degrees of one of the cardinal signs, then you're definitely perfectly connected to this full moon, which will be at 8 degrees, 14 minutes. So if you have 8 degrees of Capricorn, if a personal planet right there, then you're more likely to see something significant that's showing you like a turning point for this area of your chart. And just regardless if you have a planet there or not, look at where you have the sign Capricorn. That's generally shows like that's where you have something more traditional, more serious in that area of your life. And then how well you do that tradition or that serious part of your life will be determined on the condition of your personal Saturn in your natal chart. If it's strong, then you can do this Capricorn side very strong and maturely and just overall in a better way. If you have problems with your Saturn, then your Capricorn area of life won't be as easy or, always as good and positive. But this full moon will show you where you stand in this part of your life, with your Capricorn area of life. There could also be a trigger in government rules, laws that require a process before it's all, completely legit or done, 100% because of the Mercury retrograde as well. And then again, this will show you where you stand in your physical material life and your outer safety, security, and work and career versus home and family. So it might also show you what needs to change in your work, what needs to change in your sense of duty and responsibility in your outer life to accommodate some sort of new focus or new attention that you need to put in your inner life and your foundation of life, or your family life might require something, that needs you to kind of let something go or be ready for some sort of a change in the work environment to accommodate something in the home or the family. That's one possibility. I'm not saying for everybody, but it's generally these types of things that I just expressed. So if you have 8 degrees of Aries, this full moon is highlighting something for you personally that might not be as easy. Again, even Saturn here, Saturn is in a wide orb square to this full moon. The moon's applying towards that Saturn, even though it won't be exact until next week's report. So it's also showing us, that we don't have 100% freedom that we would like. We also might have to create changes. We might have to work towards something, get to a place where we can have more freedom and independence, but we first have to take responsibility for certain things, that this full moon could also be showing us, illuminating, bringing out to show where we stand with it all. And then, Libra as well, your personal relationships, your one-on-one connections with people, partnerships, and your capability of allowing other people in your process or your life. There's things that could come out and be seen and visible about that on this full moon, working relationships and stuff. And then, of course, the home, the family, your needs, the inner world, being affected by all this. So that's how I'm seeing this full moon. And at the same time, we see that Mars is T-squared the nodes of fate. So any kind of action that's playing out Monday into Tuesday, and I would say even the first week of July, from this point forward for the next week, really, the world is once again at another crossroads, being, connected to fate and destiny. So that also includes people that are overly impulsive by just doing something unexpectedly could lead to a fateful turning point in your life. So you have to be careful of just jumping headfirst into something. But luckily, this moon kind of counterbalances that a little bit to be more serious, to be more grounded and practical. But there's also a lot of emotions and feelings at play because of 3 planets in Cancer, and one of them being Jupiter at the very last minutes, before it changes signs here. And that will be the last aspect, is Jupiter ingressing Leo for this new transit now. And that's going to be by Monday night that this change takes place. So it won't be all day that you have Jupiter in Leo. It'll mostly be the next day for Tuesday, and beyond, because this is happening super late. And for other people, it will be on Tuesday that Jupiter changes signs. But on the West Coast, it's Monday night, the last aspect. So Jupiter coming into Leo now, that's good on one level, because it is losing its exaltation, and it's not extra dignified in Leo, but I still think Jupiter does well in Leo. At first, though, it's going to have to get through some stuff before it's at its best. Plus, the South Node will be coming. It's a whole different vibe that we'll be talking about with these eclipses and what it means. But still, I don't think it's, because I'm a fire and air person, I kind of like it in Leo, but it is losing its dignity in a sense. And now, but at the same time, it's going to lessen all these emotions and feelings. Although with Mercury, super amped up, and the sun here, it'll be a little bit before we kind of feel that, perhaps. But we're going to get it toned down, the emotions, the feelings of everything, that have been so strong with Jupiter in Cancer. Now, Jupiter's going to enhance, enliven, and try to expand wherever you have Leo in your birth chart, which is ruled by the sun. So at first, it still has this connection to the sun, and then, at first it's like Jupiter and Leo ruled by the sun in Cancer being ruled by the full moon in Capricorn, being ruled by Saturn, being ruled by Mars, being ruled by Mercury, being ruled by the moon. So you got to give this time. But now we do have the two best planets, Jupiter and Venus, in the sign of Leo. So that's just going to increase the passion, more so, the need for creativity, joy, heart, and self-expression. And this can really make people's self-expression bigger. Now, I think at first it won't be that way with the moon in Capricorn. Give it time here as time goes on. But the ego can become stronger for people. Pride can become stronger. And just generally people's good heart too. Leo is a sign that does show a lot of people with Leo, and I'm not saying every single one there, I can only speak generally here, but Leo is a sign of big-hearted people. And Jupiter here can be big-hearted and be joyful and happy and want to give and want to offer more light to the world, more happiness to the world. But generally, wherever you have Leo, that's where the expansion is going to take place over the next year. That also comes with changes of that area because of the South Node and the eclipses. So it's going to be a combination of making room in ways for the new developments. But I'm going to be talking more and more about this definitely as time goes on here. This can also bring out new things about movies and entertainment, and social activity will also want to increase more and more from this point forward. And now Jupiter's building that opposition tightly to Pluto. Now we're finally going to start to get that, especially in a month when the moon is full with Pluto in Aquarius and the sun is with Jupiter. We're going to really see what that's all about, which is a huge turning point for the world with like a whole new development, the changes in the wars and other intense extreme events. But generally it's a social dynamic that's going to build up here, and social friends, community, organizations, new levels of politics are going to start amping up and expanding to new levels. Science and technology that's coming out with Mars here next to Uranus, and now Jupiter activating the Pluto and the minor grand trine coming in. And then Jupiter will start to form kind of a basket kind of configuration, which all these planets are connecting to something larger that we've never seen before that's going to come out into the world more and more this next 2 years. So really there's going to be a lot of new dramatic developments, especially in technology. We all know that's coming more and more, but it's going to be on so many different levels. So people's passion, pride, ego, creativity, self-expression is going to increase more and more here. But again, it's great for entertainment and creativity generally. So social events are going to be much stronger this next few months in the world, like all kinds of different social events, like entertainment events and other larger than life type of intense social activity basically will be coming out. So if you do have personal planets here at 0 degrees of Leo, then you're getting a pretty rare transit. Jupiter comes in here every 12 years, but it won't last because it's going to mostly be hanging out at the end of Leo, mid to late Leo, most of its transit. But you get one quick pass if you have early degrees of Leo in your chart. All right. So let's see where I'm at here. Yeah, I better wrap this up. Pretty long report. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of it, and I wish you the best.